All right, we are here with the Men Who Shine show with my good friend Bryan Hebert, the one and only, the infamous holistic life coach focusing on substance abuse, grief recovery, calls himself a day maker. So we're going to talk to him a little bit about that, what day maker means, and really how he helps people discover a world of infinite possibilities together. So Bryan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. So, because you're always just a spark of light and inspiration.
Oh, well, same to you. Same to
I love
you.
following you.
Same
So,
to you. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm finding myself in this space of like, okay, let's pick up the pieces, let's get back to work, and let's do the thing, and really focus on how we can be of service. And so, I know that when you and I first connected, gosh, it was a while ago in Austin. I don't even know. Like, I think
couple
I'm
years
getting to
ago,
the age where I was like, was that yesterday or 1987? I don't
yeah. Right.
really have an idea, but I really appreciated your journey and really helping people through recovery as well as through grief and loss. And I'm curious what you can tell me about your experience with your partner and how you kind of navigated that loss.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll go ahead and start with that. It's kind of funny we're having this conversation right now because actually next month on October 23rd will be 4 years since Chuck made his transition. And um, we met in 2012 is when we initially met and started dating and all of that stuff, and then married in 2014. And then, like I said, October 23rd of 2018 is when he passed away unexpectedly. And it was a really bizarre sequence of events that day. I had worked, he worked from home, and I got home and he was like, hey, I'm gonna go work out at the gym downstairs, from our apartment complex. And I was like, oh, great, I have to go meet someone for coffee. And it was just very strange that we just kind of both got home at the exact same moment. And it kind of hit me funny, like, wow, this has never happened before. And he was in a great mood, and we had a brief conversation. He went to clean up, and uh, then he kind of was, started calling my name, and so I went to see, and he the sequence of events just started happening, and he died in my arms from a heart attack. And um, it was one of those things where time seemed to stand still, because I can't remember if it was like within a few minutes or a couple hours, or that kind of thing. And um, calling 911, having paramedics come, and all those kinds of things, and then them taking his body away later, and whatnot. One of my very good friends came over that evening, and he was with me the whole time. And after they took Chuck's body away, and he was about to leave, and he was like, hey, I have something for you in the car. And I'm like, I got this look on my face like, Chuck just died and you have something for me in the car. What? This is kind of weird. So he
Right.
goes downstairs, he runs back up, and he has a collection of journals. And he's like, pick one of these. He goes, you're gonna need it now. And he goes, your only instruction is to write your heart away. And that journal really became one of the greatest tools in going through that grief and loss process.
Mm.
I would just, whatever I was feeling, I would write down. I would write Chuck letters. I sometimes I would just open it up and just stare at it. But it was a really great tool to just going through that process, because every day for months, just showing up for work was extremely hard,
Yeah.
especially with, the type of career I'm in. I'm working in a school, and I have to deal with students all day, and I have to be on stage. And at the same time, I'm like, I've got to hold all this stuff in,
Yeah.
and then another amazing tool was, another great friend of mine told me, the following day. He was just like, Bryan, you have permission to feel every single feeling you're
Mhm.
feeling.
Yeah.
And that was like a major aha moment, because that's something, because of, things in my story, my background, that was never really okay, especially with
Mhm.
anger. Anger is one of
Mm.
those, that is part of grief,
Mhm.
one of, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief. Um, and I've always not done well with feeling anger, processing anger, um, things like that, and it would always kind of come out sideways, whether it was through, major grudges, resentments, or
Mm.
whether it was just through being passive aggressive,
Mhm.
um, whether it, showed up in the form of, gossip, or all of those kinds of things. So him giving me that permission was just like the floodgates just open.
Mm.
Because, in my journal, I would just write all these feelings. And one thing I experienced, I got really angry about was, as I'm going through all these stages of grief, I had a really hard time with that word stages, because it, for me, that wasn't my experience. It was like when I felt something, I felt it all at the same time. So it
Mm.
wasn't like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm angry. Oh, I'm in acceptance, or you know what I mean? It was kind of
Right.
like the tsunami of emotions. And
Yeah.
um, I definitely utilized therapy. That was a really great tool as well. Um, Another thing, what through that experience is, we live in this world where, especially in Western culture, where we really don't know what to do about grief and loss. It's kind of like, okay, do what you got to do for 3 days and then go back to work.
Right. Mhm.
Um, and in the beginning, those first few weeks, everyone's there for you, but then they have to go back to their lives as well. And
Right.
that's when, what I've learned, that's when you really need that support is, kind of later on, that month after, those 2 months after, because that first year of grief is, it's just a year of first, you know, going to the grocery
Mm.
store for the first time by yourself, going out to dinner without your partner, you know, uh, having their birthday, experiencing your birthday, the holiday.
Yeah.
It's just a year of first, and
Yeah.
um, and it that's when having that support team or system in place is super important. Um, what I've learned is that grief and loss is really its own ecosystem. It's
Mm.
not, um, it's nothing you can be like, oh, okay, I have 30 minutes right now. Let's grieve and loss.
Let's
It's
let's
like,
process this sadness before lunch would be
yeah,
great.
yeah, it's gonna hit anywhere, anytime, and anything
Yeah.
can trigger it.
Mm.
I remember you know, um, sitting in traffic at 5 o'clock after work trying to get home, and I would have anxiety attacks to the point where I'm like, oh my God, I'm sitting on I-35 and I have to get out of this car.
Mm.
I'm about to suffocate, and it would take every ounce of energy just to make it home. And and it, was really wild, because it was like I would finally get home, and the moment I would touch the doorknob to open, unlock the door, it was just like, okay, I can breathe, so there's lots of times, you just can't control it, or you
Mm-hmm.
hear a song and it triggers it, or uh,
Mm-hmm.
even yesterday, it's been almost 4 years, and yesterday I was walking in Central Market up on North Lamar, and I hadn't been there in a long time because now I live south, and I was meeting a friend, and I had to get groceries afterwards, and I was walking through the little deli area, and it was kind of like in my mind's eye, it was like all of a sudden I just kind of saw him standing there at the deli, and it was just like, because that's where we used to grocery shop, and
Mm-hmm.
like, whoa, it just kind of hits you like this place is still here, it's tangible, but that person's not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and while those waves of grief get smaller and get
Mm-hmm.
more and more far between, they
Mm-hmm.
still happen, and so I say all of that to say that, there's no timeline, there is absolutely no timeline. And that was a challenge I had because, like 6 months after he died, I was like, okay, well, I should be at this point, or I should be at that point. And no, grief is what it is. And there's no way to dictate when you're done,
Mm-hmm.
or anything like that. And I definitely truly hold sacred to the word of it's a journey. It really, really is a journey. And there, whether, obviously the loss of, him passing, um, but there's so many lessons in it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right in the beginning, the biggest lesson was this question to myself of, how do I want to show up in the world? That realization of how short life really is.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? How do I put my 2 feet back on the ground? Because, when you're in a relationship, even at, short, we were together, 6 years. So really in big time frame, that's pretty short, versus if you're with someone 40 or 50 years,
Yeah.
you get so you used to being a couple. And what does that look like doing this as you as an individual again, and being, widowed or single, however you want to, identify yourself. What does that look like? And I'm still in that exploration of it. What
Mm-hmm.
does that look like? But the lessons that I've learned is that I want to show up more authentic. I want to cherish every moment the best that I can.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to let the moments pass. If it's a friend, if it's a family member, I want to tell them I love them, because you just don't know,
Yeah.
someone's alive and breathing and doing well, and 2 minutes later they're dead,
Yeah.
and and especially if you have some unfinished business with someone,
Mm.
that can be really, really challenging. And um while I would think of, Chuck and I had a, good, healthy relationship. But there are some things that if I could do all over again, I would do differently, and a lot of it is, taking things for granted, you know,
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
that's, because when you do, go through that experience, you come out realizing like, wow, life is so short,
Yeah.
it just, and then also too, grief and loss doesn't have to always be a loss of a partner or a loss of a family member or a person. It can be something as traumatic as, one day you have a job and the next day you're laid off.
Yeah.
It just kind of
Mm-hmm.
comes out of left field.
Yeah.
uh, a breakup, with a partner or a friend. I had a perfect example, I had a best friend of mine. We've been best friends for years, gosh, years. And about 3 years ago, we kind of had a disagreement. And it was one of those disagreements that we didn't speak for about 2 years. And
Wow.
I, and that, going through what I did with Chuck, and it was just like, wait, I can't let this happen. I've got to take care of, I've got to repair or make amends or whatever. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because if something happened, I can't let this be, and
Mm,
so I got in touch with her, and we've kind of rekindled our friendship, and both gone through that forgiveness process of saying some things that we regret. And then also too, it was like, what's more important here, hashing over all this stuff, or realizing life is too short. And so I
mhm,
know I love you, you love me, and our friendship is much more greater and bigger, and uh, worth it,
mhm,
and um, so the loss of a pet. A lot of times
mhm.
people don't realize the loss that comes from a pet.
Ooh, are you there?
The collective grief around that, and all these people who've passed away, just so grief and loss is a pretty big thing that a lot of times we really don't know how to deal with, or we don't realize that we take it on and it just sits in our body.
Mm,
um,
mhm.
I have a friend here locally. He's been trained in grief yoga, and
Oh,
really phenomenal, and how to really get in touch with that. Where is that sitting in your body? And
mm,
which is pretty cool. So yeah, so that's kind of been my experience. And so after Chuck passed away, it's just become a great passion of mine that I want to be a guide to helping people through that process,
mm.
and realizing that they're not alone. Because a lot of times grief and loss can be very isolating. We can,
Oh yeah, for sure. It's kind
yeah,
of like, where do you go for that support? You know what I mean?
exactly. So, and even, there's also, anticipatory grief, which is, a type of grief that we start experiencing because we know that someone only has 6 months to live, or someone's been very ill for a long time. And so we have to start preparing ourselves for that, or making arrangements for that. And, um, I have a friend who is going through that I've been helping with, because it grief is a big nasty monster, and
Yeah.
just as much as we want to experience happiness and joy, we also have to realize that there's the opposite of that. And if I don't deal with grief and loss, then I'm never going to really experience happiness and joy, because it's really that balancing act that gives us that appreciation for life and living life to our fullest.
Mm.
But right now it's really popular catchphrase, live your great story, live your best life.
Uh-huh.
And so that doesn't mean that I can avoid the challenging times in life, or the negative times, or uh,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So, so yeah.
So well, thank you for all of that, and really great nuggets all over the place. You dropped some good nuggets, B. And what came up for me is this um processing grief with a person who is still alive. and with a relationship that's over,
Yeah.
and sometimes it can occur as more challenging
Mhm.
because the person is still alive. So it's
Yeah.
like,
Yes.
not that, oh, it's better when someone dies, but like there's a finality. When I lost when my dad died, it was like, okay, now I can process the rest of my father wound.
Yeah.
Yay. The question mark. um and there was certainly some grief that I had to process, but that's definitely totally different than losing a loved one, a partner, a spouse. So for
Oh,
me, like having a friend, when you mentioned your friend that you kind of are coming back and kind of navigating those waters of forgiveness and reconciliation, but there was like also this time where maybe you had to process grief because your relationship changed, and you have to like
yeah, yeah.
deal with, is this over, is it over, how do you make it over? So what would you say to someone who's kind of in that I would call it maybe muddy water of grief, where it's not clear that you've actually lost someone? Does that make sense?
No, it
You
makes
kind of
perfect.
have to look, you kind of have to, I
No,
mean, I don't know, I'm curious what your thoughts are on it.
well, it makes perfect sense because you hit on something a moment ago when you said that that kind of grief, maybe not, it's not it. And you didn't use this word, but I'll interject it, where it might not be as important as losing someone to death.
Mhm.
But that's the challenge, is that grief is grief is grief. And whether that person is dead or whether that person is alive, it's just as important.
Mhm.
It's just as important. And if that person is alive and it's anticipatory type of grief, or if it's just a relationship that's gone south, or a breakup or anything like that, it's just as important. And so I don't really see it as muddy waters, because if I can acknowledge that it is just as important, and the reason I say that is because I'm also, a student of A Course in Miracles, and
Love
um,
that.
there is one of the main teachings of the Course is that the only thing that's real is love. The love I get,
Mhm.
the love I receive. And so another principle is that there is no order of difficulty in miracles, and a miracle
Mm.
is defined by expressions of love. Okay. And we as humans want to prioritize or give more weight to this or that, or, it's like, oh, well, you know, um, my grandmother's very ill and they're about to pass, but you just lost your husband unexpectedly. That's more important. And, because my grandmother's older, that's just part of life. And no, no, they're just as equal. There's
Yeah.
no difficulty of order. So um I guess it is a question of what would be more important, dealing or healing your grief with whatever the experience is, which would mean uh, maybe looking at what is my part in the situation, because that's one of the
Mhm.
things I always try to do. And that I just learned from my own alcoholism and drug addiction recovery, is that anytime I have resentment, a grudge, or whatever, I always have a part, and what is it? And and A Course in Miracles tells
Yeah, we
us,
don't like to take responsibility. Well, we don't default. We don't like, oh, where can I take responsibility
yeah,
for
and
bad things?
this is the mind blow too, is that what the Course of Miracles will tell us is that heaven is entered two by two. And what that means to us is that if I have grudges, I have resentments, I have, with someone else, I will never have total inner peace, because that stuff is kind of always sitting here, right?
Mm.
resentment, that grudge, that, fear, it's never, it's always kind of sitting there on my shoulder. And so to really encompass wholeness, to really encompass inner peace and joy and happiness and all those things, I have to deal with that part. And the only thing I can deal with is, what is my part? What is, as I've often heard, keeping my side of the street clean. Doesn't mean that that relationship's going to be repaired. But what it does mean is that I will gain inner peace from it. I will gain self-knowledge. I will gain healing. I will gain lessons. And from all of that, then I can move forward. If I know that I've done my best to make amends or to atone, or whatever the word is you want to call it. The word's not important. It's the process that's important, right? So when it comes to someone who's living, I'll separate it into two. First, let's say it's someone who only has a few months to live, or who's been very ill.
Okay.
I would definitely, and there's stuff in the past you need to deal with. Have that conversation, no matter how hard it is. Have that conversation, because you will regret it more if you don't have that conversation after that person passes away. And you'll always have that question in your mind of like, damn, I should have had that conversation. Or I wish we would have, talked about this before. So you'll always kind of have that little regret lingering. Now, in terms of someone who's still living, and let's say it's a breakup or loss of a job, and you're pissed off or angry at an employer or whatever. Again, what is my part in it? What is it that I need to do? Where is the lessons for me? And one of my little sayings, and it's not my own, I got it from somewhere else, is that every problem, every situation, every challenge that I have in my life comes bearing gifts. What are those gifts? And the only way I can get to those gifts is to look at my part. Okay, was I being a butthole? Was I being grandiose? Was I, whatever that I was being too controlling? Whatever that is, I said things I probably shouldn't have said. Was I trying to control a person, place, or thing? Whatever that is. And being able to look at that, because when I look at those things, I can guarantee you that at the bottom of that list of my part, there's always going to be some sort of fear. And that fear is either going to be something I want, I'm not going to get, or something I have is going to be taken away. Once I can do that, then I can take that next step. And do I need to make amends? Do I need to have a conversation, attempt to have a conversation, or it's beyond repair? So where do I need to forgive myself? Where do I need to forgive that other person? And you often hear that forgiveness is not about letting them off the hook or whatever, that it's really about me. But depending on how far you want to take it, that your actual forgiveness practice is, it's really about letting yourself off the hook. Using the example of Chuck's passing, I had a lot of forgiveness work to do around myself. And the grief and loss process as a whole, I would define it as one of my greatest gifts was, and still is learning to be gentle with myself. And when I can do that, I can then experience honor. I can experience peace. I can experience joy. I can experience contentment. I can experience happiness, because whatever rifts you have with someone about anything are not important anymore. You
Mm,
see what's really important, and you can live and experience what's really important. Does that make sense?
hmm. Yeah, so I really appreciate that, because we don't often, particularly men in the queer community, don't default to be gentle on ourselves,
Yes.
right? Like we're all either beating up on ourselves or having impossible standards of perfection for ourselves or others,
Yeah.
either being beaten down or beating other people down, either directly or indirectly.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
this notion of tolerance is not necessarily applied as a blanket. Let's just be tolerant in general. So what I've noticed is, oh, tolerance is okay. I'll tolerate you as long as you believe the same as I believe. That it's not tolerance for tolerance sake. We're still on the whole acting out of our wound.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely.
the thing that I'm hearing in your share is that the grief has allowed you to process a lot of your wounds, that perhaps you weren't gentle with yourself before, you weren't as patient with yourself or others
Yeah.
as you were before. And yeah, so that is the gift, the I'll say the angel of death, right?
Yeah.
Have you read The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, I
Yeah.
believe this is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just reread it for the second time this past year, and I read it the first time almost 10 years ago. And so, before, it was like, right, I was just kind of like a baby gay, just having come out. And,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
when I read it the second time, because I figured, so much of my life has changed. I mean, I feel like I'm constantly changing, but between, the pandemic and losing my event production business and my little stint with homelessness and, all that, I'm just a completely different person now. So
Absolutely.
I'm going back and rereading things, and they feel completely new to me, where I'm just like, did I read that? And so I really appreciate the end of that, because it ties into what you're saying about, really seeing that this is a gift to know that our time is limited, and it's something we don't really, it's something we know, but we don't really act like it's real, and this
Yeah.
is just kind of like a conundrum with humanity, is we pretend that we're not all we don't all have an expiration date.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
And
like,
it's not until something happens, then it hits us
and we're
like,
like, oh, that's
oh, yeah.
right, none of
Yeah.
us make it
Yeah.
out of the make out of this planet alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
And, you bring up a amazing point, especially, within the queer community. It's like, when you look at the queer community right now, it's like, we have a whole generation that's missing, because of, the
AIDS and,
pandemic or AIDS. Uh, what am I trying to say? I forgot. Back in the 80s and 90s, where
yes.
the AIDS epidemic was just, out of control, and
Mhm.
no one was wanting help, and, going all that. So we have we have like this older, mature generation of queer people, and we have this younger generation, and we're missing that gap. And
Mhm.
especially when we grow up in a community where we got to be tough, and because we learn to have thick skin, you
Mhm.
know being queer, um there comes a time where that thick skin doesn't work anymore, because we base a
Mm.
lot of who we are as queer people on how I look, how I dress,
Right.
all of these kinds of things. And then, the aging process does start to happen, and youth falls away. And you're like,
Yes.
oh my God, I'm not as pretty as I was, or
Right.
whatnot. And,
I feel attacked right now, Brian.
and I'm like, from Still Magnolias, you realize time is
Yes.
walking across your face. you know, and the queer community, we have a lot of a lot of unresolved grief, whether it's
Mm,
collectively, whether it's
mhm,
individually, whether it is even in the terms of our own internalized homophobia with each other,
mhm.
right? You know, it's like, oh, they're in that queer sort of community. I'm in this queer sort of community.
Yes,
Oh,
yes. Lots
that's
of siphons, lots of siphons.
yeah, you know, and it's like, you know, and it takes a horrible experience like AIDS to bring the community together.
Yeah,
That's when we can let down all the, you know, all the facades, you know, and
right.
realize that, you know what, we're in this together, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we don't realize how much grief and loss really is a part of our lives.
Hmm.
And uh, you know, trauma is, it's kind of like, it's kind of like a ladder, you know, and it's like you have one experience but you don't deal with it, and then you take the next experience and you don't deal with it.
Hmm.
And you keep climbing the ladder, and all of a sudden that ladder breaks and you come crashing down, right? And that wound is just huge. No more
Yeah.
band-aids. You know, the band-aids don't work anymore. You can't buy enough clothes, you can't buy enough cars, you can't drink enough, drug enough, you know, all of, nothing will cover those band-aids, you know, that wound. So,
Right.
um you know, and a lot of times in recovery, that's one of the biggest things people have to deal with, you know, is all all their childhood wounds, all their, you know, broken relationships, all their um you know, uh just their own, what we've done to ourselves, you know, what we've done to ourselves. And you know, for, you know, last summer I took a part of my training as a coach was I did a course with David Kessler. And David Kessler is, he's like a protege of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and he's now like the top leading authority on grief and loss. And he actually had another stage added to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, and it's called meaning. And he actually spoke with her foundation, her family, and, you know, because he had worked with her and all this kind of stuff, it was approved, so to speak, to be included in this
Hmm.
belief. And what, you know, that last stage is acceptance, or was, and what he's added is meaning.
Hmm.
And how do I find meaning in grief and loss? You know, like you were just talking about, you know, that your life is completely different because of experiences you've
Right.
gone through, and things have a deeper meaning, and life
Hmm.
has a deeper meaning and a greater appreciation, you know, and stuff like that. So finding meaning is kind of the goal, if you will. And I don't like to use that.
Hmm.
It's kind of the goal, but I can't get to meaning unless I'm willing to do the work that's all right here. You know?
Right. Until you actually give yourself the space and the permission to make what happened mean whatever you want to make it mean,
Yeah.
you know, and really seeing that you have that autonomy and that freedom and that choice to make it mean really anything. We can make it mean, we can reinforce our old trauma wounds and make it mean that we're a victim and that we're being beaten down and that life isn't fair.
Yeah.
We can make it mean that we need to medicate ourselves, or we need to get drunk, or we need to oversex ourselves, or we
Right.
can make it mean whatever that we want to make it. We want to transcend, we want to evolve, we want to become more patient, more loving, more kind, more equitable, more inclusive, which is my intention. I mean, I fall short all the time. And, you know, kind of speaking to what you brought up is this missing gap, this generation gap, where we don't have a large number of people to show us what it's like to be in community, to have queer community, to have gay relationships, to have this nuanced sexuality. You know, we have these heteronormative ideas, but there are, so particularly because of the AIDS epidemic, there are not a large number of people, a generation ahead of us, that to show us this is what growing old gracefully means. I don't know, do you follow the old gays on TikTok or Instagram?
Yes, I do. I do. I love them. They're
I do.
hilarious.
I love them too, because it's transcending this youth obsessed narrative that I feel like a lot of gay men have adopted, or and now it's like there's larger number of us because of medication and healthcare and HIV prevention and education and stuff like that, who are quote unquote older or who are really, I feel like Pathfinder, blazing the trail of this is what's possible. It's okay to settle down. It's okay. We don't have to go clubbing all the time. It's okay. We don't have to it's okay to have time run across your face.
Right.
Just a
Exactly.
little, but it's
Skincare.
just a little. But
I can help with that as well. So
what's that?
I said, and I can help with that as
I
well.
know.
My mobile
I'm gonna have to book you for all the things.
exactly.
But yeah, I appreciate you and people like you and like myself who are, navigating these grown-up waters of authenticity, and really putting this stamp of love, I'll call it, particularly for Course in Miracles students, and what they say is, everything is either a call to love or a call for love, and really understanding that distinction in
Yeah.
our interactions with one another and as a community, how we can come and really embrace our history and those who have come before us, who have given us the luxury to be as out as we are. Right now, that's not occurring for a large number of people in other countries and even parts of our own country. What I've noticed in my own journey is like, oh, I think because I'm out and I've transcended the toxic religious trauma narrative and things like that, like it's done. And it's not. Movies like Pray
Yeah.
Away showed me like, no, it's still going. It's just rebranded,
Yeah.
this
Exactly.
toxic I'll say toxic definition of self. So, what I hear in your share is, in your life story, and I'm sure we could, talk for another 2 or 3 hours about, this truly loving ourselves, loving life, being willing to forgive ourselves, forgive others, be with the feelings, not judge any of the feelings as right or wrong, allow ourselves to feel what's there to feel, to not make ourselves weak or less than in whatever it is that we're up against, and to know that it is possible. I mean, particularly for any of us in the queer community who are also in recovery. I feel like that's the minority of the minority, right? Like, and hopefully it's getting more to where people are more open to an alcohol-free lifestyle. But that's still a large percentage of us who are, kind of doing the heteronormative thing, and really what it means. And one of the last questions I want to ask you is, this allowance to let us shine our light or be authentic or be fully self-expressed apart from substances and apart from alcohol. We don't need it to relax. We don't need it to, if we're sad, it's certainly not going to make the sadness any better. In fact, it's going to make it worse. So that's a whole other, like, how do we navigate those waters of recovery as queer community members? So maybe we'll have to do a follow-up on that one. But my one question is, what do you do now to shine your light?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, going back to the stage of finding meaning, and one of the very first things that I started doing is anytime I know someone who has a loved one that has passed away, I mail them a journal, and I call it my angel journal project, and I give them the same instruction that was given to me, to write your heart away, and you have permission to feel whatever you're feeling.
Oh,
So that's definitely one thing that I love doing. Another thing is it really propelled me also into getting into life coaching, which I've always loved. I love, a large part of my life the last 14 years now is being, a teacher and an instructor. And there's nothing more exciting to me when you see that light bulb go off, oh my
mhm.
God, you got it. This is so cool. And passing it on, because, as the course would tell us, our only function and purpose in life is to be of service to other people, you know,
Yes.
and when I can get out of myself and be of service,
Mm,
it's amazing what happens.
mhm.
My stuff doesn't seem quite as big, or
Right.
I find a little bit of joy, or I find a little bit of laughter, um, and there's just something that happens in that exchange of when I'm being of service to someone else, because my ego's not quite as big anymore.
Mhm.
I'm not putting myself above or less than. I'm just being of service. We're all equals here.
Mhm.
We're together, and it's just kind of, like that quote by Ron Doss, it's like we're all just walking each other home, you know.
Yes.
And so random acts of kindness, I kind of,
Mm.
that's kind of, it's funny. I used to despise when I was growing up and as a younger adult, when people were like, oh, you're always so nice and sweet and kind. And I hated that because I felt like, so why don't you just tell me I'm a goody two shoes? It was just kind of
Uh-huh.
that thing. And I've come to embrace it because um, we can never have enough kindness in the world, right?
Yes.
you
Mhm.
know and again, another quote by the Dalai Lama is like, kindness is my religion. And
Mm.
um I've just really embraced that, because when I can do that, um I feel that's when that divine spark in me can come forth, you know
Mm.
and and it's easier for me to see it in other people,
Mm.
like
Mhm.
in you. It's like I'm a huge fan, you always are a presence of love, kindness, laughter, fun, creativity, vulnerability, authenticity, right? Creation, and that's what we're here to do, and we're here to see that in other people and realize that, if I took my bodysuit off and you took your bodysuit off, there's no point at where I began and you end, and vice versa.
Right.
We're just
Yeah.
all one. We're
Yeah.
all one. And it's high time we realize that, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so I guess that's kind of ways that I look at letting my light shine. And it's so funny. This is going to sound so silly, but every so often when I'm in like this really awesome mood, I'll start, singing "This Little Light of Mine."
Oh, that's cute.
Go back to my church days,
Don't let Satan it out. I was like, I don't know.
Exactly.
Maybe I do want a little blow from Satan. Oops. Did I
Yeah.
say that out loud?
Uh, but and then and just connecting with people, really, that I think that's the best way to
Yeah.
really connect and let your light shine and
Yeah.
stuff like
I
that.
really
So
appreciate that.
because again, we oftentimes we think I'm alone, I'm the only one going through this.
Right.
uh you know I can't ask because no one's going to help me.
Mm,
No one's
hmm.
problem is as big as mine.
Yeah.
All of those that I call it like that shitty committee, like Brene Brown says, always speaks first, always speaks loudest, and it's always usually a judgment about yourself.
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That isolation and alone. I love that. I hadn't heard that before. Brene Brown said that shitty committee.
Yeah. Well, she calls it the shitty first draft or something.
Oh
And
my
I
gosh.
just pick up on it, that's that shitty committee, you know.
Oh, that's
And
great.
where I also get that from too is in the course it talks about the, you know, the ego always speaks first and it always speaks loudest. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times when I react to a situation or I react on an impulse or, you know, I pick up that phone and cuss someone out or, you know, or I
Mm-hmm.
give in to that impulse to spend money I don't have or, you know, whatever, you know, it's
Mm-hmm.
all, so I just call it my shitty committee. And if I can recognize that, wait a minute or two, let
Mm-hmm.
it calm down,
Mm-hmm.
then the real me can step forward, you know, and usually it's
Yeah.
going to be that quiet, still, small voice, you know,
Mm-hmm.
my intuition, my gut, you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's great. I love that, Bryan. Thank you so much for sharing. And, you know, really it's the magic of service too. You know, people don't, it's kind of like anytime I feel like it's almost like a magic antidepressant pill in a way, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
to be of service and to sign up. I just pulled up the thing to sign up as a Trevor Project volunteer. But I also have done volunteer runs for Keep Austin Fed, which is
Yeah.
you know, they repurpose food that would have normally been thrown away and redistribute it to local food banks, charity shelters, things like that.
Cool.
So I used to partner with them in my other business with event production. And since I stopped doing that, I'm now like a food runner. So it's all grassroots. It's all like you can sign up for different runs. So I'll go pick up. I don't do it as frequent. Now that we're talking, I'm like, okay, I need to sign up for a run this week because I don't do it consistently. And
Sure.
so, you know, but every time I'm like, okay, get back on, you know, do the thing that doesn't, you don't think it has an immediate benefit for you, because you're kind of doing something out of the kindness of your own heart, and you do get the benefit. Like I do get the benefit because it's like, okay, I
Yeah.
realize, you know, I'm picking up surplus food and flowers and whatever else from the grocery store, and then I'm dropping it off to, you know, the last one I think I did, I've dropped it off at a couple different churches, and then it was this home for women who are coming out of abusive relationships.
Yeah.
So it's like a safe harbor kind of
Mhm.
place. And I mean, these places, you know, you hear of nonprofits and things like this, you don't, but
Mhm.
like to actually be at a place, and you know, there's so many, so much need out there, you know, and it's like I can let myself get overwhelmed with like, I'm not doing enough and I need to do more and da 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 da. But it's like, okay, I'm going to do the little thing, and that's enough, you know. And that, you know, it brings a sense of grounding to me, to be
Mhm.
of service and to
Mhm.
be just service minded, whether it's for a client or nonprofit, or if there's not anything directly that I think I'm getting out of it. I
Mhm.
think that God, love, light, universe, whatever you want to call it, does bring I do get something out of it. I can't not, because like you said, we're all connected, and it's like the little forests in the trees. And when one of the trees is sick, they send out a little signal, and then they divert nutrients and water to the other trees in the forest. So they watch out for one another. So that's
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
think we can have our connection in that space.
Absolutely. Yeah, because as I, you know, it's always a two-way exchange.
Mm-hmm.
As I receive, it's not like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm giving, now I'm receiving. It's all in
Mm-hmm.
the same.
Yeah.
It's all in the same.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
awesome.
Yay. Well, where can people, I'll include links and stuff like that at bryanhebert.net. Where else can people connect with you and all that jazz?
Cool. Awesome. I would love to hear from people. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So is that the place to do it? Is it you have different social media handles or anything like that?
Yeah, I have Instagram, Daymaker Holistic Life Coach,
Okay.
and a Facebook page, Daymaker Holistic Life Coach.
Okay, cool. Well, I will definitely include that with this interview. And thank you so much again for taking the time. Hang on just one second. I'm gonna end it, and then we're gonna say bye again, because I have to say bye twice apparently.
Okay.
So thank you so much again, Bryan.
You are so welcome. Thank you.
You're okay.